Dr. Sarah Ortiz was buying groceries when a stranger approached her. "You saved my life 3 years ago," he said. Her blue eyes widened in confusion. She had never seen this man before in her life. It was a typical Saturday afternoon at Whole Foods. Sarah was picking out avocados for her weekly meal prep, her blonde hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, wearing jeans and a comfortable sweater. After another exhausting week at Metropolitan General, grocery shopping was her 1 hour of normalcy. No emergencies, no life or death decisions, just choosing between organic and conventional produce. "Excuse me, doctor." "Ortiz?" Sarah turned to see a man in his mid-40s approaching her cart. Average height, brown hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked completely ordinary, like any other weekend shopper, but there was something in his expression, a mixture of gratitude and nervous recognition. "Yes," Sarah replied cautiously, her medical training making her automatically assess whether this was someone who might need help. "I'm David Martinez," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You probably don't remember me, but you saved my life 3 years ago. I've been hoping to run into you to say thank you." Sarah's piercing blue eyes studied his face carefully. As a surgeon, she prided herself on remembering her patients, especially the critical cases that involved life-saving procedures. But this man's face was completely unfamiliar. "I'm sorry," Sarah said politely, "but I think you might have me confused with another doctor. I don't recall treating you." David's response made Sarah's blood run cold. "No, it was definitely you," David insisted, his eyes lighting up with certainty. June 15th, 2021. Emergency surgery for a ruptured spleen after my motorcycle accident. You were wearing blue scrubs, and you kept telling me everything would be okay while they prepped me for surgery. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She did remember June 15th, 2021. It had been one of the busiest trauma days of her career, with multiple emergency surgeries. But she had no memory of David Martinez or any motorcycle accident involving a ruptured spleen. "You sang while you operated," David continued, his voice growing more detailed. "Something soft, almost under your breath. And when I woke up in recovery, you checked on me personally. You said my wife could come in to see me." "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake," Sarah said, her voice beginning to shake slightly. "I keep detailed records of all my patients, and I would remember—" "You told me that the surgery was touch and go for a while," David interrupted, stepping closer. "That my spleen had been completely shattered and you had to remove it entirely. You said I was lucky the internal bleeding hadn't been worse." Sarah stared at him in growing alarm. The surgical details he was describing were accurate, the kind of specific medical information that only someone who had experienced that exact procedure would know. But she had absolutely no memory of this man or his surgery. The conversation that followed challenged everything Sarah thought she knew about her own life. "David," Sarah said carefully, "can you describe the operating room? What did it look like?" "Or three," he said without hesitation. "There was a small crack in the ceiling tile directly above the table. I remember staring at it while you explained what would happen. The monitors were to your left, and there was a young resident with red hair assisting you." Sarah's heart began pounding. OR3 did have a cracked ceiling tile that had never been repaired. And 3 years ago, Doctor. Jennifer Walsh, a red-haired resident, had been part of her regular surgical team. "What about my voice?" Sarah asked, testing him further. "What did I sound like?" "Calm, confident. You have a slight accent. Maybe from growing up in the Southwest, and you called me Mr. Martinez until I asked you to just call me David." Sarah did have a faint New Mexico accent from her childhood, something most people didn't notice unless they paid close attention. The details were becoming too specific, too accurate to be coincidental. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered. I have perfect memory when it comes to my patients. I remember every surgery, every face, every case. How is it possible that you remember me so clearly when I have no memory of you? David reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper. You gave me this, he said, handing it to Sarah. It was a business card from Metropolitan General with Sarah's name and title. In handwriting that looked suspiciously like her own, someone had written on the back, "Remember, you're stronger than you think. Dash Dr. Sarah Ortiz." Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at handwriting that was unmistakably hers. I write notes like this for patients sometimes, she admitted, but I don't remember writing this one. Dr. Ortiz, David said gently, is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I feel like I have, Sarah replied honestly. David, would you be willing to come with me to the hospital? I need to look up your medical records. There has to be an explanation for this. An hour later, they sat in Sarah's office at Metropolitan General as she pulled up the hospital's database. David Martinez, motorcycle accident, June 15th, 2021. The record was there, complete with surgical notes in Sarah's own handwriting, post-operative care instructions, and discharge summaries. According to the official records, Sarah had indeed performed emergency surgery to remove David's ruptured spleen. The surgery had lasted 3 hours and had been successful. David had recovered fully and been discharged 5 days later. I wrote these notes, Sarah said, staring at her computer screen in disbelief. This is my handwriting, my surgical technique, my post-operative care plan. But I have absolutely no memory of any of it. The mystery deepened when Sarah discovered what else had happened on June 15th, 2021. Checking her personal calendar from that day, Sarah found something that made her stomach drop. June 15th had been the day her father died, a traumatic event that had sent her into a months-long period of grief and emotional instability. I was dealing with my father's death that week, Sarah said quietly. Maybe the trauma affected my memory of that time period. But even as she said it, Sarah knew it didn't make sense. She had continued working throughout her grief, and she remembered other patients from that same week clearly. David watched her struggle with growing concern. Dr. Ortiz, maybe the important thing isn't why you don't remember. Maybe the important thing is that you saved my life, whether you remember it or not. But how can I not remember something so significant? Sarah asked, her blue eyes filled with confusion and fear. I've never experienced memory loss like this. What if there are other patients I've forgotten? What if this is happening more often than I realize? The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. As she sat in her office, staring at medical records that proved she had saved a man's life with no memory of doing so, Sarah realized she might be facing something far more serious than simple forgetfulness. Memory loss in medical professionals could indicate stress, trauma, neurological issues, or worse. The surgeon who had dedicated her life to healing others was suddenly faced with the terrifying possibility that her own mind might be failing her. And she might not even know which other critical moments of her career had disappeared from her memory. David, Sarah said finally, thank you for finding me. I think you may have just saved my life in return. As David left her office, Sarah stared at the business card with her own handwriting, wondering what other pieces of her life might be missing and whether the woman who remembered saving thousands of lives could figure out how to save herself from forgetting who she truly was. Dr. Sarah Ortiz, the blonde surgeon with piercing blue eyes who had always trusted her perfect memory, discovered that sometimes the most important patients are the ones who remember us when we can't remember ourselves. Sarah Ortiz's encounter with David Martinez reminds us that our impact on others can be profound, even when we don't remember it ourselves. Her story shows us that sometimes the people we help become the unexpected mirrors that help us see ourselves more clearly. If Dr. Sarah Ortiz's mysterious memory gap intrigued you, subscribe to the Frontline Voice for more psychological mysteries and real human stories. Hit like if you believe our forgotten moments might be just as important as the ones we remember. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been told about something important you did but couldn't remember? Share Sarah's story with someone who understands that memory can be both blessing and mystery. Until next time, remember that the lives we touch may remember us long after we've forgotten touching them.